Hi, everybody. It's May 4th, 2026. May the 4th be with you. I've been posting these videos as a form of therapy to recover from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Cairns, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away in his group home by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government. David Eby as leader, Nikki Sharma as Attorney General. They locked Paul away on September 12th of 2022 for 588 days after I complained to the Burnaby police, the Burnaby RCMP, when I discovered a secret and what I alleged to be a fraudulent and forged power of attorney the government created to give Paul the COVID-19 shot. They didn't want me to have in-person access to Paul, although we had visited at will for 64 years. I'd taken him to Newfoundland twice. I'd taken him to Seattle. I cared for him at my home on the weekends. But they didn't want me to have access to him so that I could get an authentic sample of his signature, because they forged his signature on this document they created to give Paul the COVID-19 shot. So I did everything in my power to try and legally, civilly restore Paul's freedom and his right to visit with me and my right to visit with him. I was his last surviving local family member and visitor, so he was effectively locked away when my visits with him were cut off. I used to take him on outings every weekend. So they locked Paul away for 588 days. They had appointed my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister, who was 16 years older than Paul and had never resided with him. She moved out when he was born. She didn't understand his speech or communication, but the government appointed her as his guardian. And when I complained to the police, the government ordered her to terminate his visits with me. And she did. She had two law firms working for her, one in Ottawa, a lawyer named Charles Gibson, and a law firm in British Columbia in Vancouver. Casey Deanshaw was her lawyer in Vancouver. I estimate that the Catholic Church spent over $2 million keeping Paul locked away. And then after Paul had been locked up for 588 days, I got an email from the Vancouver lawyer saying that Paul had had a stroke and was at Burnaby Hospital, and I could visit him. I could arrange a visit with him through the lawyer. I dropped everything and raced to Burnaby Hospital. And when I saw Paul, he grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight. When I said my name, he had an oxygen mask. He had a ventilator on. But he appeared to be recovering remarkably well. I was surprised at how well he was doing. He sat up. I had brought him a book. He sat up and grabbed the book from my hand and turned the pages perfectly, scanned the pictures perfectly. But when I was visiting Paul on April 21st of 2024, after he had been in the hospital for 8 days, I got a telephone call from the Burnaby police, the Burnaby RCMP, and the sergeant that I spoke to told me the police had been ordered to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. So I went to court the next morning and tried to get the judge who had conduct of the case to suspend the nun's guardianship of Paul pending the RCMP investigation. So at that moment, on April 22nd of 2024, the nun knew that I had been contacted by the RCMP and that I knew that they had reopened the investigation into her fraudulent and forged power of attorney. Within 2 hours, Paul was dead. When I went to visit him, they killed Paul right in front of me. I believe that they did medical assistance in dying on him, even though supposedly you're supposed to be mentally competent. Mentally handicapped people cannot consent to being killed by the state in Canada. And so, although Paul, as I said, had appeared to be recovering remarkably well, when I saw him after I'd been telephoned by the Burnaby RCMP and had been informed that they had reopened the investigation, when I walked in the hospital room, The nun walked up to me and she said, through gritted teeth, she wouldn't look me in the eye. She just said, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." Just like that. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She wouldn't let me near his face. But he looked dead to me at that point. They had removed his oxygen mask, his ventilator, and he was lying perfectly still. He didn't respond when I squeezed his hand. His eyes were wide open and unfocused. I've seen dead people before. He appeared to me to be dead. Although she said, I didn't hear from her again until the next day, and she emailed me and said that he had died, but I could come and look at his body. I was never invited to. If there was a funeral, I wasn't informed of it, although I was his last surviving family member in Vancouver. Then after Paul died, the nun went after me. The nun in the Catholic Church went after me and had a 4-day hearing to have me designated a vexatious litigant. That's a very rare and unusual designation in Canada, which suspends all of my access to the courts in Canada, even though I was the first woman single mother to graduate from law school in British Columbia in 1991, on May 28th of 1991. I was a federal prosecutor and then practiced family law for 23 years. But I believe the nun was afraid that I was going to be a credible witness for the RCMP investigation and that I would bring a wrongful suit for her having killed my brother, unlawfully done medical assistance in dying on him. So after a 4-day hearing with 2 full days, I'm a disabled person from an accident in 2008 and also had a heart attack in 2016. I had 2 medical certificates and a letter from my cardiologist at the hearing to have me declared a vexatious litigant. But the judge, who was a woman judge named Judith E. Hoffman, Hoffman, she said that she thought that she ignored the medical certificate saying I couldn't appear in court for longer than 2 hours per day. And she went ahead and had 2 full-day hearings. So, and also she had none of my materials. My sister, although as I said, she spent over $2 million on the legal representation, she didn't have any of my documents before the judge in the hearing to have me declared a vexatious litigant. When you bring on an application for something in court, you've got to photocopy and bind both sides' documents, but they didn't include mine. They only had my sister's documents. I pointed that out to the judge. She didn't care. And she declared me a vexatious litigant. So that's destroyed my credit rating. It's destroyed my personal reputation and my professional reputation. They took away all of Paul's rights and locked him up, took away all of his freedom. That's what these evil Liberal and NDP governments in Canada, they descended to the 11th level of hell in their treatment of people. There's no civil liberties. If it doesn't suit their purpose to recognize people's human rights, like Paul's human rights, they ignore them. So I've been posting these videos, as I said, as a form of therapy to try and recover. After I had been declared a vexatious litigant and after Paul had died, I started to look into the law around medical assistance in dying in Canada. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. When I was in law school not that long ago, from 1988 till 1991, and I was a federal prosecutor. My second highest mark in law school was criminal law. But what had happened was that there was a Supreme Court of Canada decision. It's not that complicated, so it's really important to try and understand how this came to be, how doctors and nurses came to be able to kill by lethal injection innocent, vulnerable Canadian citizens with no trial, no hearing, no judicial oversight at all. It's called extrajudicial execution. I thought, what the hell's going on? How could they do this? This is first-degree murder. But what I discovered was that in 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada reversed its earlier decision. It had had a case called Canada versus Sue Rodriguez, where it said that it was not in public interest to have doctors and nurses kill people, even people who were terminally ill, for a variety of reasons. But then unanimously and anonymously, the Supreme Court of Canada in Ottawa reversed their earlier decision that was only 20 years old. I mean, I remember that decision. And they said that doctors, there was a woman who had applied to be killed who had spinal stenosis. That's a kind of paralysis or fusion of the spine. And the Supreme Court of Canada said it wasn't fair to them, for her to have to wait until she became terminally ill to be killed by a doctor or a nurse. And the Supreme Court of Canada gave the Canadian government 12 months to come up with an effective system of guardrails to prevent the misuse of this euthanasia of innocent, vulnerable Canadians. And the system, you may not understand how it works, but it's just a regular doctor or nurse. They don't need to know the patient or the person, and they don't have to have any knowledge or specialty in understanding the complaint that the person is suffering from. Canada kills 45 people a day this way by lethal injection. It's an injection that paralyzes the person so that they drown in their own lung fluids. It was never intended for the purpose of killing people, because to test it for that would be unethical. By Canada Day of 2026, Canada will have executed extrajudicially more than 100,000 innocent, vulnerable Canadians. So I was watching I'm a conservative, and I have worked my ass off for the Conservative Party of British Columbia and for the Conservative Party of Canada, hoping to reverse this horrific crime against humanity of euthanasia in Canada. And I watched Pierre Poilievre being interviewed by Joe Rogan, and the first question that people from other countries have is about this euthanasia. Once they find out about it, like me, they're shocked and they wonder, how the hell could this ever have happened? Or I forgot to say that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada panel of 9 judges that reversed its earlier decision and allowed for the extrajudicial execution of Canadian citizens as medical assistants. Her name was Justice Beverly McLaughlin. And you won't believe this, but almost immediately after making that decision, she went on salary with the Communist Party of China in Hong Kong and worked for the Communist Party of China in Hong Kong as a Court of Appeal judge in Hong Kong for 6 years, from 2018 till 2024. I'm not kidding. And since she made that decision, allowing for the extrajudicial execution of Canadian citizens, as I said, more than 100,000 innocent, vulnerable Canadians will have been killed by Canada Day 2026. So I watched the interview of Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, by Joe Rogan. And the very first question that Joe Rogan, the most famous podcaster and probably the best podcaster in the world, had for Pierre Poilievre was, he said, what is going on with this euthanasia? Are you going to reverse this euthanasia in Canada? And Pierre Poilievre said, I don't want to do anything that will disrupt people's right to choose. And I just wanted to say, in this tonight, or in this podcast, that the issue of consent, people cannot give informed consent to being killed. And that's why we've always been able to kill people, and pretty painlessly and quickly too. But even the Neanderthals did not kill people, because we don't know what death is. The word medical comes from the Greek and the Latin verb to heal, and you don't heal anyone by killing them. So in my religion, I'm a Catholic, you believe that after you die, you either go to heaven if you've been good, but if you've committed mortal sins and you haven't been forgiven, you go to hell and burn forever. Or if you haven't been baptized, you go to purgatory, which is, most people in the world believe in reincarnation. And many people believe that there's nothing at all, but there is no way for anyone to give informed consent to being killed. And that's probably why in 40,000 years of human civilization, we haven't killed members of our society or of our community. That's part of the social contract, is that even though I might be elderly, weak, and vulnerable, I know that I can still associate with you. And even if I can't contribute to society, you're not going to kill me. Canada has destroyed that social contract, and I firmly believe that it is Communist Party of China interference in Canadian life, in Canadian politics. The first thing that Mao Zedong did with the Cultural Revolution in China is he killed 100 million people, starved to death, or tortured and killed 100 million people. And that's exactly what's happening in Canada. So the place to start is never refer to euthanasia in Canada as MAiD. It's a made-up propaganda, evil word created by government bureaucrats. And their day is going to come, just like Hitler faced his comeuppance. The people that engaged in euthanasia before World War II, the first thing that Hitler did, people don't remember this, but the first thing that he did is that he killed all the elderly, ill, and disabled people in Germany. He had gassed to death 350,000 people before World War II even started. So never say the word MAiD. Don't use it in any context. Say kill or execute or euthanasia, but never say MAiD, because MAiD is murder. I love you all. Take care.